What if I told you there's a Hindu god who drank cosmic poison to save the universe, dances to create and destroy worlds, and transformed from the most feared deity into the most beloved? Shiva's story spans from ancient Vedic times as Rudra the Howler to becoming the cosmic dancer Nataraja, whose every movement births galaxies. He's the ultimate paradox, the destroyer who protects, the ascetic who loves passionately, the terrifying god whose devotees find infinite compassion. From drinking deadly poison that turned his throat blue to teaching the first yoga, Shiva embodies contradictions that somehow create perfect harmony. When the first Aryan chariots rolled across the Hindu Kush and down into the fertile valleys that would one day be called Hindustan, they brought with them gods carved from wind and lightning, deities born in the howling spaces between earth and sky. Picture this, a sacrifice ground somewhere in what maps now call the Punjab 3,500 years ago, when the Rig Veda was still being whispered into existence by priests whose tongues held the power to make or unmake worlds. The fire burns at the center of everything, as it always does. Around it, Brahmins in white robes that flutter like prayer flags arrange their sacred implements with the precision of surgeons. Golden ladles that have never touched mortal food. Wooden vessels carved from trees that grew in groves. No axe was permitted to violate. Soma pressed from plants whose very identity has become one of history's most jealously guarded secrets. These are the masters of ritual, the architects of cosmic order, the men who speak directly to gods and expect to be heard. But they inhabit a world we can barely imagine, where words are not mere symbols, but living forces capable of reshaping reality, where every syllable carries the weight of universal law, where a mispronounced mantra can bring famine or flood. They know things we have forgotten, that sound creates form, that breath carries soul, that the fire before them is not mere combustion, but the very mouth of the divine, hungry for offerings and attention. First, the wind, not the gentle breeze that stirs wheat in familiar fields, but something else entirely, something that tastes of snow from peaks so high they scrape the belly of heaven, something that carries on its back the scent of places where no human foot has ever fallen. The horses tied at the sacrifice ground lift their heads and whinny, their eyes rolling white with an anxiety that predates thought. The sacred fire gutters and spits, its flames bending away from the altar as if the very air has become hostile to illumination. The priests know this presence. They have another word for it, a name that sits uneasily on mortal tongues: Rudra, the Howler, the Red One, the god who dwells in the liminal spaces where civilization ends and the wild begins, who rules over everything that makes ordered life impossible: disease and madness, storm and drought, the sudden death that comes without warning or apparent cause. In the Rig Veda, that most ancient of texts, he is described with the kind of fearful reverence reserved for powers too dangerous to ignore, but too terrifying to embrace. He is the fierce god with braided hair, the lord of heroes, he who strikes down the proud. But beneath the formal Sanskrit epithets, you can hear the trembling in the voices of those who speak his name. This is not a deity who answers prayers for prosperity or grants boons to the faithful. This is the god who reminds mortals that they are mortal, that all their careful rituals and prescribed offerings cannot protect them from the fundamental chaos that lurks at the heart of existence. And yet, and this is where the story becomes strange, where familiar patterns dissolve into something unprecedented, the mountain tribes who live beyond the reach of Vedic civilization tell different tales. In their villages, perched on impossibly narrow ledges where only goats and madmen dare to dwell. Rudra is not the enemy of order, but its hidden guardian. They say he dances in the cremation grounds at midnight, his ash-smeared body gleaming like silver in the moonlight, his matted locks swaying with rhythms older than human memory. They say he teaches secrets that cannot be learned from books, initiates disciples through ordeals that would destroy those who sought only comfortable wisdom. The transformation from Rudra to Shiva, from the howler to the auspicious one, does not happen suddenly, like lightning splitting darkness, but slowly, like water carving through stone. It begins with recognition, the gradual understanding that what the Vedic priests had dismissed as pure destruction might contain within it the seeds of creation, that what seemed like cosmic enemy might actually be cosmic necessity. For consider what Rudra destroys, not life itself, but life's attachments to what is already dying, not order itself, but order that has become rigid, stagnant, corrupt, not beauty itself, but beauty that has forgotten its own transient nature. He is the forest fire that clears deadwood so new growth can emerge, the fever that burns away disease, the terrible honesty that shatters comfortable lies and forces souls to confront truths they would rather avoid. The Yajurveda, composed generations after the Rigveda by priests who had learned to see deeper into the cosmic patterns, begins to acknowledge this paradox. Here, Rudra is still terrible, still dangerous, still the god who must be approached with extreme caution. But he is also revealed as the keeper of ultimate secrets, the guardian of knowledge too potent for ordinary minds to hold. We know thy supreme name, the texts proclaim with something approaching awe, which is auspicious, which brings healing, which is the refuge of all beings. Shiva. The word itself carries a different energy than Rudra. Where the older name crackles with barely contained violence, Shiva flows like oil, like honey, like the sound of distant bells carried on evening air. It means auspicious, benevolent, gracious, but these are not mere synonyms. They point toward a recognition that had been slowly dawning in the collective consciousness of those who dared to look beyond the surface of things, that destruction and creation are not opposites, but dance partners, that death and birth are movements in a single cosmic rhythm, that what appears to end is always, in some mysterious way, beginning. On Mount Kailash, where the air grows thin and every breath becomes a conscious act, where snow falls even in summer and the silence holds conversations that words cannot capture, there appears a figure that defies every category the mind attempts to create. He sits in lotus position on a tiger skin, his body smeared with the ashes of cremation grounds, his hair piled high in matted locks that hold within their tangles the sacred river Ganga herself. Around his neck coils a cobra whose hood spreads like a crown, whose venom could kill gods and mortals alike, but who rests in perfect trust against the throat that knows no fear. This is Shiva as the eternal ascetic, the master of yoga, the one who has discovered that the deepest power comes not from acquisition, but from renunciation, not from grasping, but from letting go. His meditation is so profound that it sustains the universe. His stillness is so complete that it contains within itself all possible movement. He is the timeless witness who watches the cosmic dance play out across the eons, who remains unmoved while galaxies are born and die, who holds in perfect balance the forces that create and the forces that dissolve. But even this is not the end of the story, for Shiva contains within himself contradictions that would shatter any merely logical understanding. He is the ascetic who renounces the world, and the householder who loves with infinite passion. He is the destroyer who dances on the corpse of ignorance, and the protector who shields his devotees from all harm. He is the terrible god whose third eye can reduce entire universes to ash, and the gentle father who plays with his children in gardens where lotus flowers bloom out of season. The cosmic stage is set now for all that follows. Creation, preservation, and destruction are revealed not as separate functions belonging to different deities, but as three aspects of a single eternal process. Three movements in a dance that has no beginning and will have no end. Brahma may speak worlds into existence. Vishnu may sustain them through their various ages and transformations. But it is Shiva who provides the fundamental rhythm that makes both creation and preservation possible. The willingness to let what has served its purpose pass away so that what seeks to be born can emerge. From his seat on Kailash, from his meditation that encompasses all time and space, the one who was once Rudra, the howler, looks out upon the world with eyes that have seen beyond the veil of appearance into the heart of what is. He sees the dancing figures around the sacrifice fires, still chanting their careful Sanskrit verses, still offering their prescribed oblations to gods whose names fill ancient books. He sees the mountain tribes who have always known his deeper nature, who approach him not through fear but through love, not through ritual but through direct recognition of kinship. And he smiles, not the terrible grin of the destroyer, but something infinitely more complex, infinitely more compassionate. For he knows what they are all slowly learning, what the great story that stretches out ahead will gradually reveal, that there is no separation between the divine and the human, between the cosmic and the personal, between the terror that breaks down false certainties and the love that builds up eternal truths. The storm god has become something unprecedented in the annals of religious experience, a deity who embodies the fundamental insight that destruction and creation, ending and beginning, letting go and embracing are not different activities, but different names for the same eternal process. In his transformation from Rudra to Shiva, from the feared outsider to the auspicious one who sits at the heart of everything, he has shown that even the most terrible truths, when fully embraced, become sources of infinite blessing. Out of the fading age of simple gods comes the ascent of the paradox divine. At first light upon Kailash, with pearl-bright snows eternal and winds heavy with mantras older than speech, the greatest story gathers strength, preparing to begin its endless song of birth and dissolution, of surrender and return, of death that is always the hidden gateway into a greater life. In the time before hierarchies crystallized among the gods, when the cosmos was still young enough for its architects to argue over blueprints, two beings of immeasurable power found themselves locked in a dispute that would reshape the very foundations of reality. Picture this cosmic moment. Somewhere in the infinite expanse beyond mortal geography, Brahma and Vishnu face each other with the intensity of rival suns. The argument begins with a question that seems simple, but contains infinite complexity. Who among them holds ultimate supremacy over the universe they have helped to fashion? Brahma, the four-faced creator whose every breath brings new worlds into being, claims priority through the logic of Genesis. Without his initial act of creation, nothing else could exist. The lotus-born deity gestures toward the countless galaxies spinning in the void around them, each one a testament to his cosmic fertility. Vishnu watches his fellow deity with eyes that have witnessed the birth and death of more universes than mathematics has numbers to count. The Dark One's response carries the weight of eons. Creation without preservation is merely cosmic waste, brilliant fireworks that flare and die without meaning. You speak of beginning, Narayana says, his words rippling through dimensions. But what is birth without the sustained heartbeat that follows. The grandfather's 4 faces flush with challenged authority. His reply comes swift as creation itself. And what would you preserve if I had never dreamed it into existence? Your maintenance is merely housekeeping, cosmic custodianship of wonders that emerged from my consciousness. Back and forth, the debate rages, each deity marshalling arguments that would satisfy any court, save one composed of their peers. What neither expects is the intervention that comes not as word or gesture, but as presence so overwhelming that their cosmic debate falls silent. Between them, rising from reality's foundation, like a pillar thrust up from the earth's molten core, appears something that defies every category their divine minds attempt to impose upon it. Fire that burns without consuming, light so pure it becomes darkness to eyes, accustomed to lesser radiance, containing within its brilliance every color that has ever been or could ever be. The cosmic pillar stretches beyond divine perception, upward past the highest heaven, downward past the deepest foundation, challenging the very concepts of beginning and ending. Its surface writhes with energies that predate both creation and preservation, forces ancient when the first thought stirred in the cosmic mind. Brahma stares upward at the ascending column, his 4 faces reflecting bewilderment. Never in all his eons of creating has he encountered anything that so completely transcends his understanding. The cosmic revelation doesn't simply exist. It exists with such fundamental authority that reality itself organizes around it. Let us test this mystery, the 4-faced one declares, his voices harmonizing in a chord that makes distant galaxies tremble. I shall fly to its summit and discover what lies at the apex of this cosmic column. The lotus-born deity transforms into a swan of immeasurable size, his wings spanning the breadth of solar systems. Upward he flies, past layers of reality that exist only in divine consciousness, through dimensions where time moves backward and forward simultaneously, beyond the boundaries of his own creative imagination. For 1,000 years he flies, then 10,000, then 1,000,000. The pillar continues above him, unchanging, yet revealing new aspects of its mystery with each level of ascent. He passes through realms where unborn universes wait in potential, where the mathematics of creation work themselves out in pure abstraction. Still the cosmic axis rises above him, neither narrowing nor widening, simply continuing with the implacable persistence of absolute truth. Meanwhile, Vishnu undertakes his own investigation, diving downward with the determination of one who has never accepted mystery as final answer. The cosmic preserver transforms into a boar of cosmic proportions, his tusks capable of rooting through reality's foundations. Downward he burrows, past the roots of the cosmic tree, through substrata where physics dissolves into something more fundamental, into depths where the very concept of space loses meaning. For aeons he digs, his divine strength never flagging. Like his fellow deity above, the maintainer finds that the sacred column continues past every boundary he encounters, descending through levels of reality beneath his understanding. He passes through realms where dissolved universes await rebirth, where accumulated karma resolves into new possibilities. When both deities return to their starting point, their divine forms showing signs of weariness neither has experienced in countless ages, the confrontation that awaits them will reshape their understanding of their own nature. The Creator arrives first, his swan form settling back into his familiar 4-faced appearance. But something fundamental has changed in his bearing. The grandfather has encountered the limits of his own supremacy. found himself reduced to explorer in regions that clearly predate his creative activity. Yet pride prevents Brahma from simply admitting defeat. When the Preserver returns from his own unsuccessful quest, the Lotus-born makes his fateful declaration. "I have seen the summit of this cosmic pillar," he announces, his four voices carrying conviction that almost masks the deception beneath. There, at the apex beyond all measure, I found a magnificent lotus bloom, and within its petals, the source of all that is. I am that source, and this pillar is merely an extension of my creative power. The Dark One's response carries the weight of absolute honesty. "I found no bottom to this cosmic column," Vishnu admits without shame. "However deep I descended, however far beyond my understanding I traveled, the pillar continued past my ability to follow. This mystery exceeds my comprehension, and I acknowledge my limitation with gratitude rather than regret. The moment of falsehood and truth becomes the cosmic fulcrum on which the future balance of divine power will turn. For the pillar itself begins to respond to their words, its fiery substance shifting and pulsing with new intensities, as if their different approaches to ultimate mystery have triggered some long-awaited cosmic mechanism. From within the infinite column, a form begins to emerge, not descending from above or ascending from below, but manifesting from the pillar's very substance, as if the cosmic fire itself were taking shape according to principles too fundamental for even divine minds to grasp completely. What appears is Shiva in his aspect as Maheshvara, the great lord whose being encompasses both the terrible and the beautiful, both the creative and destructive principles that the cosmic axis represents. His form blazes with the same fire that constitutes the sacred column, yet shaped now into features that speak of consciousness aware of itself. The great lord's first words establish the new cosmic order with finality that admits no appeal. "You, Brahma, who sought to claim through falsehood what can only be acknowledged through truth, shall find your worship among mortals diminished. Rarely will temples be built in your honor. Seldom will prayers be offered to your four faces. The lie you have spoken here will echo through eternity as the limitation that prevents you from receiving the devotion you crave. But for the Preserver, whose honesty in the face of cosmic mystery has proven the integrity of his character, different words are spoken. You, Vishnu, who have demonstrated that true power lies in the acknowledgement of what exceeds understanding, shall be beloved by mortals throughout all ages. Your preservation of truth itself marks you as worthy of the devotion that flows from honest hearts." The cosmic pillar begins to contract then, not disappearing, but condensing itself into a form that mortal minds will be able to approach without being overwhelmed. What emerges is the lingam, the sacred symbol that will become the focus of worship for countless millions across the ages. A simple pillar shape that contains within its apparent simplicity the infinite complexity of the cosmic fire from which it emerged. This holy sign represents not any particular aspect of reality, but reality itself in its most fundamental form, the creative principle that exists before form and beyond form, the consciousness that dreams all universes while remaining forever unbound by any single dream. The establishment of the Trimurti grows naturally from this cosmic revelation. Not three separate gods competing for supremacy, but three aspects of a single reality that transcends all three: creation, preservation, and dissolution, as movements in an eternal dance choreographed by consciousness itself. From his retreat on the sacred peak of Kailash, the Eternal One surveys the cosmic order that has emerged from this celestial confrontation. Maheshvara has established his supremacy not through conquest, but through revelation. not by defeating his fellow deities, but by revealing the principle that underlies their respective functions. He is the consciousness within which both creation and preservation unfold. The eternal witness whose awareness makes both cosmic birth and cosmic death possible. The age of simple divine rivalry has ended. The age of cosmic synthesis, where all seemingly contradictory principles are recognized as aspects of a single overwhelming truth, has begun. And in the first temples where the lingam receives its first offerings, the greatest mystery of existence continues to reveal itself to those who approach with honesty rather than pride. When gods and demons discover they share the same desperate hunger for immortality, the cosmos itself becomes their kitchen, the primordial ocean their cooking pot, and eternity the prize they race to claim. Picture this scene of unprecedented cooperation. Somewhere in the vast waters that girdle the earth, divine beings and their ancient enemies stand side by side, united by need, stronger than their mutual hatred. The plan emerges from Vishnu's strategic mind with elegant simplicity. Churn the cosmic ocean as mortals churn milk into butter, and from its depths will rise Amrita, the nectar that grants eternal life to any who taste it. Use Mount Mandara as the churning rod, wrap the serpent king Vasuki around it as a rope, and let gods and demons pull from opposite ends until the waters yield their ultimate treasure. The churning begins at dawn, on a day that will be remembered until the last star dies. Gods grasp Vasuki's tail, while demons, in a display of pride that will prove fortunate, insist on seizing his head. The sacred mountain, uprooted from its foundation and planted in the ocean's heart, begins its first slow rotation as immortal and infernal muscles strain against the weight of destiny itself. At first, the great churning proceeds exactly as planned. The ocean begins to froth and bubble, revealing treasures that have slept in its depths since creation's dawn. Uprise precious gems that capture light and hold it prisoner. Golden ornaments that make earthly crowns seem like children's toys. Wish-fulfilling cows whose milk flows like liquid contentment. The goddess of wealth herself emerges from the churned waters, choosing Vishnu as her eternal consort. But the ocean, like any force pushed beyond its limits, begins to rebel against the violence being done to its ancient calm. The sacred mountain starts to sink into the depths, until Vishnu manifests as Kurma, the great turtle diving beneath Mandara to provide the stable foundation that keeps the churning operation from collapsing into chaos. With the divine turtle supporting their enterprise, gods and demons resume their labor with renewed vigor. The mountains spinning faster, the waters responding with ever greater violence to their demands. More treasures emerge. The divine physician, Dhanvantari, appears bearing a pot of Amrita, his smile promising the immortality that has driven their unprecedented cooperation. Then everything goes wrong. From the ocean's most secret depths, disturbed from a sleep that has lasted since before the first dawn, rises something that makes all the treasures seem like mere trinkets. The halahala poison emerges not as liquid, but as presence, not as substance, but as principle, the concentrated essence of everything that opposes life, everything that seeks to return existence to the silence that preceded creation. This is not venom as mortals understand it, not toxin that merely kills the body while leaving the soul intact. This is cosmic poison, reality-destroying corruption, the distilled negation of everything that is, was, or could ever be. Its vapors rise like dark prayer, and wherever they touch, the very fabric of being begins to unravel. Flowers wilt not into death, but into never having been. Rivers forget how to flow. The air itself grows thin and strange. Gods and demons, united moments before in their churning enterprise, scatter like leaves before hurricane wind. These are beings who have faced universal battles, who have wrestled with time itself, yet before the Halahala, they flee like frightened children. Even Vishnu finds himself backing away from poison so fundamental that his protective powers cannot touch it. The toxic vapor spreads with relentless patience, expanding toward shores where mortals dwell in ignorance of the doom approaching them. Every breath of wind carries death, not just to individuals, but to the very concept of individuality. Every ripple bears dissolution, not just of life, but of the possibility of life. Into this crisis, when all others have fled and terror has silenced even the bravest voices, steps Shiva. He approaches the expanding cloud of Halahala, not with hurried panic, but with the measured pace of one who has already calculated the cost and accepted it. Here is the destroyer walking toward the one thing that could destroy even him, the master of endings approaching the ultimate ending, with something that might be serenity or might be the deepest form of divine love. The great Lord does not pause to consult with fellow deities, does not call council meetings to debate strategies. He simply opens his mouth and drinks, not sipping carefully like one tasting wine, but drinking deeply like one dying of thirst, consuming the poison that threatens all existence with the same wholehearted commitment he brings to his eternal dance. The Halahala flows into him like liquid night, like concentrated despair, like the weight of every ending that has ever been. It burns through his divine essence, not with heat, but with cold so absolute it makes Arctic winds seem tropical. Pain so fundamental it exists before the nervous system evolves to register it. Yet even as the reality-destroying toxin courses through his form, Parvati acts with swift grace that marks true partnership in crisis. The mountain daughter places her hands around his throat, with pressure that speaks not of violence, but of infinite protective love. Not past this point, her touch declares without words. The poison stops here. And stop it does, halted by the power of love, made manifest as physical intervention. The Halahala spreads throughout his form, but cannot descend past the barrier created by his consort's hands. It suffuses his throat, staining the skin blue-black, like a wound that contains all wounds, like a mark that testifies to sacrifice beyond all previous understanding. Thus is born Neelakantha, the blue-throated one, the god who wears venom like jewelry, the cosmic protector whose very body bears witness to what love will do when existence itself hangs in the balance. The mark at his throat becomes not disfigurement, but decoration, not sign of damage, but symbol of salvation. The crisis passes, the Halahala neutralized not by being destroyed, for cosmic poison cannot be unmade, but by being contained within a being mighty enough to hold it without being consumed. The ocean calms, the vapors dissipate, and gods and demons emerge from hiding to find the world still spinning, still breathing, still possible. But something fundamental has shifted in the universal order. The deity once known primarily as destroyer has revealed himself as protector. The god whose dance brings endings has demonstrated that he dances also to preserve beginnings. In consuming the poison that would have ended everything, Shiva has shown that destruction and protection are not opposites, but partners. From his seat on Mount Kailash, where he withdraws to contain the toxin still burning in his system, the blue-throated one contemplates what has been revealed through crisis. The role of destroyer has always carried within it this protective function. For what is the destruction of evil but the protection of good? What is the ending of ignorance but the preservation of wisdom? The poison burns in his throat still, will burn there through all the ages to come, a constant reminder of the price that true compassion sometimes demands. but it burns now without spreading, contained within a divine form strong enough to hold even cosmic corruption without being corrupted. When devotees in ages yet to come approach temples where the blue-throated one receives their prayers, when they offer water to cool the throat that still burns with venom drunk for their sake, they will be acknowledging not just power, but love. Love so complete it will drink death itself, rather than let those under its protection face what they cannot survive. The destroyer has become the ultimate protector, and existence itself rests easier, knowing that there exists at least one being willing to bear any burden, drink any poison, accept any mark of sacrifice if doing so keeps the eternal dance spinning toward joy, rather than toward the silence that preceded all sound, all movement, all possibility of hope. In the golden hall of Chidambaram, where the boundaries between earth and eternity dissolve like sugar in monsoon rain, something unprecedented is about to unfold. Picture this sacred space, not merely a temple built by human hands, but the cosmic theater where consciousness itself will perform the dance that creates and destroys all worlds. The very air shimmers with anticipation, pregnant with the possibility that mortal eyes might witness the secret choreography that keeps existence spinning in perfect rhythm. Here, at what the ancients recognize as the true center of the universe, two extraordinary beings have come to witness what promises to be either the greatest performance in creation's history or its final act. They sit in perfect stillness, these watchers, their bodies arranged in poses of reverence that have required lifetimes of discipline to achieve. Patanjali, the serpent sage whose very name will one day become synonymous with the codification of yoga itself, coils his magnificent form in spirals that mirror the fundamental patterns underlying all movement. His hood spreads like a canopy of living shadow, his eyes fixed on the empty stage with the patience of one who has learned that the greatest truths reveal themselves to those willing to wait through however many eons necessity requires. Beside him sits Vyagrapada, whose devotion has been so complete that his very flesh has taken on the characteristics of the great cats, his feet transformed into tiger paws, his movements carrying the fluid power of the jungle hunter, yet his heart beating with the gentleness of one who has discovered that true strength lies in surrendering to something infinitely greater than the small self. These two sages represent the twin pillars upon which all spiritual seeking rests, the systematic approach and the path of pure devotion. Together, they form the perfect audience for what is about to unfold, witnesses equipped both intellectually and emotionally to comprehend the cosmic significance of the dance they have come to observe. The stage remains empty for what feels like eons. Not empty in the sense of absence, but empty like the pause between heartbeats, like the silence between musical notes that gives the sound its meaning. This is the pregnant void from which all possibility emerges, the cosmic womb that holds within its apparent nothingness every form that has ever been or could ever be. Then, without fanfare or dramatic entrance, Shiva simply appears, not materializing from elsewhere, but revealing himself as having always been present, like a photograph slowly developing in the chemical bath of awareness, like a truth that was always obvious once finally seen. But this is the destroyer in an aspect that transcends all previous manifestations. This is Nataraja, the Lord of Dance, the cosmic performer whose every movement will reshape reality itself. His form blazes with inner fire that casts no shadows, because it is the source of all illumination. His limbs arranged in poses that contain within their geometry the mathematical principles governing stellar motion and atomic structure. His hair, matted with cremation ground ash and adorned with the crescent moon, flows around his head like a dark river in which stars swim. From its tangled depths, the sacred Ganga cascades in silver streams that seem to flow not just through space, but through time itself. Around his neck, the serpent Vasuki coils in lazy contentment, no longer the rope used to churn the ocean, but now a living ornament that symbolizes time itself. Time tamed, transformed from linear progression into the eternal now of pure awareness. In his upper right hand, the cosmic dancer holds the Damaru, the hourglass drum whose shape mirrors the fundamental structure of creation itself. This is not merely a musical instrument, but the timepiece that will establish the rhythm to which all existence must dance. His upper left hand bears the sacred fire, not destructive flame that consumes indiscriminately, but the purifying blaze that burns away only what no longer serves. This is the fire of transformation, the cosmic furnace where ignorance is refined into wisdom. The lower right hand extends in Abhaya Mudra, the gesture of protection that promises sanctuary to all who approach with sincere hearts. The lower left hand points downward toward his raised foot, directing attention to the limb that hangs in space like a promise of liberation. But it is what lies beneath the dancing god's right foot that transforms this performance from spectacle into profound teaching. There, pressed down but not crushed, writhes Apasmara, the demon of ignorance, the embodiment of forgetfulness, the cosmic force that makes beings forget their true nature. The dwarf demon struggles beneath the divine foot, not in physical pain, but in the agony of one whose existence depends on maintaining illusions that are being systematically exposed. Yet notice that the Lord of Dance does not destroy this demon entirely. Ignorance, like darkness, serves an essential function. Without the forgetting that the embodiment of ignorance represents, there could be no joy of rediscovery, no ecstasy of recognition when consciousness realizes its own nature. Balanced in the dancer's embrace, the demon is subdued but not gone, recast as partner instead of rival in the eternal movement. The dance is set in motion. The first movement of the sacred drum sends ripples through space-time itself. Not sound as mortals understand it, but primordial vibration from which all sounds will emerge. These are the 14 primary sounds from which Sanskrit will be born, and through Sanskrit, the very capacity for divine language. Each beat marks not just a moment in time, but the birth of time itself. The duration between drum beats becomes the basic unit of temporal measurement, the heartbeat that will regulate everything from planetary orbits to the lifespan of mayflies. As Nataraja's feet begin their intricate patterns, as his arms weave geometries that contain the blueprints for crystal formation and flower growth, the dance of creation and dissolution begins its eternal performance. This is Ananda Tandava, the dance of bliss that recognizes no separation between joy and destruction, between ending and beginning, between the dancer and the dance. With each step, galaxies are born and die. With each turn of his head, new forms of consciousness emerge and return to their source. With each breath, universes inhale into existence and exhale back into potential. From their seats of perfect witnessing, the serpent sage and the tiger-footed one watch this choreography, with minds open to comprehensions that will take lifetimes to integrate. They are seeing the fundamental mechanics of existence itself, the secret engine that drives all transformation. The dance continues, will always continue, even when the golden hall crumbles to dust, even when the last star burns out. For this is the dance of existence itself, and as long as anything is, was, or could be, the Lord of Dance will be dancing, his movements the very pulse of reality, his rhythm the heartbeat of all that lives. On the slopes of Kailash, where the air grows so thin that each breath becomes a conscious act of will, sits a figure that defies every expectation the mind attempts to form. This is not the terrible destroyer whose third eye can reduce universes to ash, nor the cosmic dancer whose movements birth galaxies. This is Shiva in his aspect as Adiyogi, the first teacher, the primordial master who discovered in his own being the science that would one day be called the path of union. Picture him there in the half-light before dawn, when the mountain peaks catch fire from a sun that has not yet appeared to lesser elevations, his body smeared with ash from cremation grounds where ordinary people fear to tread, gleams like polished silver in the ghostly illumination. The tiger skin beneath him speaks not of conquest, but of mastery, the ability to rest in perfect comfort upon what would terrify others. Around his neck, the cobra Vasuki coils with lazy contentment. The serpent's hood spreads like a natural crown, but there is nothing of human royalty in this arrangement. This is the monarchy of one who has conquered the only kingdom that matters, the restless territory of his own mind. His matted locks hold within their tangles something unprecedented. The sacred river herself, the celestial Ganga, cascades in silver torrents from the dark forest of his hair. The cosmic ascetic has tamed the goddess of waters, caught her in his locks as she fell from the highest heavens, transforming what would have been catastrophic flood into gentle streams that nourish the earth. Before him, arranged in a perfect semicircle like students in the world's first classroom, sit the Saptarishis, the 7 sages whose names will one day blaze as stars in the constellation that bears their title. Bharadvaja sits with the patience of one who has learned that true wisdom cannot be hurried. Kashyapa maintains perfect stillness. Atri has learned to devour ignorance itself. Vishvamitra embodies the warrior transformed into sage. Gautama represents the lineage of eternal teaching. Jamadagni maintains the inner fire that burns away the inessential. Vasishtha demonstrates the abundance that comes from cosmic alignment. Together, these stellar sages represent every possible approach to the ultimate questions that drive human seeking. What they are about to receive will not negate their previous accomplishments, but reveal the underlying unity that makes all approaches expressions of a single science. The great ascetic begins to speak, his first words shattering expectations about divine instruction. Instead of promising easy answers, he describes the human condition with precision that makes their previous understanding seem like children's games. "You are not who you think you are," he tells them, his voice carrying the authority of one who has verified this truth in direct experience. What you call yourself is a collection of memories, desires, and fears you have mistaken for reality. What you call life is a dream you have forgotten you are dreaming. The 7 seers listen with the intensity of those who recognize something unprecedented. This is not philosophy as they have known it, not theology as their culture has developed it, but science, the systematic exploration of consciousness itself, the careful mapping of inner territories more vast than any external landscape. There is a way, the first yogi continues, to wake up within the dream without losing the ability to function within its reality. There is a method to discover your true nature without abandoning human responsibilities. There is a path to absolute freedom that requires understanding what the world actually is. What he teaches them is yoga, not physical exercises that will later bear this name, but the complete science of human transformation, the systematic methodology for evolving from unconscious reaction to conscious response, from fragmented awareness to integrated understanding. He teaches pranayama, the regulation of life force through conscious breathing, that reveals breath as the bridge between voluntary and involuntary, between mortal and immortal aspects of human nature. through precise control of inhalation, retention, and exhalation. The primordial teacher demonstrates how awareness can be directed inward toward its own source. The discipline of dharana follows, concentration that gathers scattered mental energy into a focused beam capable of penetrating the deepest mysteries. This is not forced concentration, but natural gathering that happens when fascination replaces distraction, when love replaces seeking. From dharana emerges dhyana, meditation proper, where meditator, meditation, and object merge into single flowing awareness. Here lies the secret the great rishis have been seeking, the recognition that seeker and sought are one, that journey and destination are identical. Finally, the original master reveals samadhi, absorption so complete that even the sense of being absorbed disappears, union so total that even the concept of union becomes irrelevant. This is not a state to be attained, but recognition of what has always been present. But the cosmic ascetic teaches not through words alone, but through transmission, not through explanation, but through direct sharing of his own realization. Each sage finds himself spontaneously entering states of awareness they could never have imagined, discovering capabilities they never suspected, accessing dimensions of understanding that transform their entire relationship to existence. As the teaching continues through days that feel like lifetimes, through silences that contain more instruction than volumes of scripture, the 7 seers begin to understand why their teacher dwells in cremation grounds, why he adorns himself with ash, why he finds companions among ghosts and spirits that terrify ordinary mortals. The burning ghats represent the truth that cannot be avoided. Everything that begins must end. By making his home where this reality is most visible, the great Lord demonstrates that true spirituality finds in the facts of existence the doorway to transcendence. The ash covering his body is not decoration, but sacrament, physical reminder that all forms are temporary, all appearances transient. To wear ash is to carry constant recognition that what seems solid is ephemeral, what appears permanent is in constant flux. His friendship with spirits and supernatural beings reveals mastery over the hidden dimensions of existence. These entities, invisible to ordinary perception, but clearly present to expanded awareness, represent subtle forces that shape both inner and outer experience. As instruction nears completion, the stellar sages understand the deepest teaching, that the terrifying exterior their master presents, the ash, the cremation ground dwelling, the wild appearance, protects the liberating truth he embodies from those unprepared to receive it. For the ultimate practice is not comfortable or safe in any conventional sense. It is systematic dissolution of everything false, careful dismantling of every illusion, fearless exploration of territories where the unprepared mind would shatter. Only those who can look upon the destroyer without flinching, who can find beauty in what appears terrible, are ready to receive the science that transforms human consciousness into divine awareness. As the ageless ascetic continues his descent into boundless meditation, his first students rise to bring their vision into the world, stepping into the mantle of teachers, shaping lineages that will carry this knowledge forward through endless ages. Inside Daksha's radiant palace, where gold flashes from every wall and jewels whisper of power gathered across endless ages, a young princess roams the marble halls in restless wonder. Sati, child of the Lord of Rites and Celestial Order, listens for whispers drifting from the mountains, legends of an ash-covered wanderer who dances among the dead and speaks truths no courtly scholar can match. She has never seen him, this unconventional deity whose name makes court priests shift uncomfortably. Yet something in the whispered descriptions calls to a part of her nature that refined palace life has never satisfied. Where others hear tales of a mad god threatening established order, Daksha's daughter hears the song of absolute freedom. The moment she first glimpses him through palace windows, silhouetted against burning ghats where he performs midnight meditations, his presence strikes her consciousness like lightning. This is not ordinary attraction, but recognition of complementary forces. The established meeting, the revolutionary, the civilized encountering the wild. Her father watches this fascination with mounting horror. The ritual master, whose authority rests upon maintaining cosmic order through proper ceremony, cannot comprehend how his daughter could be drawn to a being who embodies everything his system exists to control. He is no proper god, the patriarch declares when Sati speaks her mind. He dwells with demons and corpses, covers himself with ash like a madman, knows nothing of proper ritual. What can such a being offer the daughter of Daksha? But the devoted one sees what her father cannot, that beneath the terrifying exterior lies sanity so complete it appears insane to those who mistake convention for truth, that ash and animal skins speak of freedom, requiring no external validation. When they meet, their union becomes inevitable with the force of natural law, not marriage as social contract, but cosmic joining of perfect complements, power meeting devotion, wildness meeting commitment, the eternal bachelor meeting the one capable of loving him exactly as he is. The ceremony shocks the divine court with its utter disregard for order. No golden ornaments adorn the ascetic, no silks replace his tiger skin. He appears as ever, terrible yet beautiful, the destroyer made beloved through perfect acceptance. But the ritual master's fury festers like an unhealed wound. The patriarch cannot tolerate a son-in-law who embodies everything his system exists to transcend. If he cannot prevent the marriage, he can demonstrate that the ash-smeared ascetic holds no legitimate place in the divine hierarchy. The plan, emerging from Daksha's wounded pride, announces a great sacrifice so magnificent, every deity will consider attendance an honor. Every deity except one. The invitation lists read like cosmic royalty's directory, yet the great lord's name is conspicuously absent. When Sati overhears the servants speaking of the grand ritual and grasps the weight of the intended slight, her heart shatters not for her own sake, but for the disorder this insult will unleash upon the greater order. She goes to her father with her last measure of dignity. How can you hold a sacrifice, honoring all deities, while excluding the one who embodies sacrifice itself? She asks. What harmony can emerge from ceremony, beginning with such disrespect? Her father's response reveals his pride-driven blindness. That wild ascetic has no place among civilized deities. Let him dance with corpses in cremation grounds where he belongs, not in sacred halls where proper gods conduct business. The beloved realizes no words will bridge the chasm between rigid understanding and liberating truth. If she cannot prevent this cosmic insult, she can ensure its consequences fall where they belong. On the sacrifice day, a ceremonial fire blazes with offerings from every corner of creation. As hymns honor every deity except the one whose dance sustains ceremony's possibility, Daksha's daughter appears uninvited. Her presence electrifies the gathering with approaching storm's tension. If there is no place in this ceremony for my husband, she declares with finality, then there is no place in existence for me. Before any divine being can move, before her father can comprehend what his pride has driven, she steps into the ceremonial fire and allows flames to consume her mortal form. The silence stretching across dimensions breaks with a roar from Kailash's direction that makes thunder whisper, shaking reality's foundations. Mountain peaks tremble, earth cracks, space begins tearing as the cosmic ascetic's grief transforms into fury, threatening to dissolve the universe back into primordial void. What appears on ceremonial ground defies description. This is Shiva, as destroyer in his most terrible aspect, hair streaming like dark fire, eyes blazing with dying sun's light, his presence warping reality. From a single hair torn from his head, he creates Virabhadra, the terrible warrior demonstrating what happens when cosmic order is violated through pride. The avenging spirit moves through the ceremonial ground with absolute justice's precision, bringing each participant exactly the consequences their actions earned. The ritual master faces divine wrath, made manifest as his sacrifice dissolves into rubble and ash. But as terrible justice plays out, as Virabhadra's destruction threatens all creation, as Rudra promises universal dissolution, Vishnu intervenes with surgical precision. The preserver understands even righteous fury becomes destructive if unchecked. The maintainer's discus, hurled with divine precision, tears apart the beloved's body before cosmic fury can engulf creation. Wherever her fragments fall upon the earth, sacred places arise, 51 Shakti Pethas, where the feminine divine will be honored through the ages, turning grief into eternal blessing. Exhausted by grief, overwhelmed by fury's magnitude, the great Lord withdraws to Kailash peaks and enters meditation so profound the universe holds its breath. This is not teaching meditation or sustaining awareness, but absorption of one discovering that even divine love, when attached to particular forms, becomes suffering threatening cosmic order's foundations. In utter stillness, in silence where the destroyer rests as consciousness surrounds existence, realization arises. Love and grief, clinging and surrender, self and universe. All are rhythms in the endless dance that builds, sustains, and dissolves, while formless being remains untouched, free, forever dancing at the center of the cosmic storm, the crystal palace of Himavat, where snow never melts and air seems carved from diamond, becomes the birthplace of a child whose first breath carries the fragrance of lotus flowers that have never bloomed on earthly soil. The Mountain King and Queen Maina look upon their daughter with wonder, transcending ordinary parental joy. For this is the return of divine love in new form, the reincarnation of she who sacrificed herself in cosmic fire. Parvati grows in beauty that gathers light from eternal snows, her skin golden as dawn, breaking over sacred peaks, her eyes holding depths speaking of wisdom earned through previous lifetimes. Yet she carries no memory of her previous existence as Daksha's daughter, no recollection of the cosmic tragedy ending in self-immolation. She is both continuation and fresh beginning, the same soul wearing new flesh. The mountain daughter's childhood unfolds in halls where crystalline walls reflect possibilities, where thin air carries whispers of cosmic secrets. Without understanding why, she finds herself drawn to tales of the ash-smeared ascetic who dwells beyond her father's domain, the destroyer whose grief has turned him to living stone. When consciousness recognizes its deepest longings, Uma begins pilgrimages to the meditation cave where the great Lord sits in absorption, so profound that birds nest in his matted hair. Vines grow around his motionless limbs. Accumulated snow has nearly buried his tiger-skin seat. She comes not as devotee approaching deity, but as servant tending one who has forgotten embodied existence's basic requirements. Day after day, the Golden One cleans the cave, arranges fresh flowers that will never be noticed, offers fruits and water to lips sealed in absolute withdrawal's silence. She speaks to the motionless figure as if conversation were possible, sharing news of changing seasons, describing light's play on distant peaks, recounting dreams of dancing in impossible gardens. The meditating ascetic gives no sign her presence registers, no indication devoted service penetrates his absorption's depths. Yet something in the cosmic order begins stirring, recognition deeper than conscious thought, that what was lost slowly returns in new form, that love, which appeared to end in ashes, secretly prepares its resurrection. But the gods, watching this patient devotion with growing hope, decide passive service will not suffice to awaken the destroyer from stone-like trance. They petition Kamadeva, the archer of desire whose flowered bow has never missed its target, whose jasmine and lotus arrows can kindle passion in the most resistant hearts. The desire deity approaches with confidence born of countless victories, his bow strung with arrows crafted from intoxicating blossoms, his timing calculated to spring's arrival, when even the cosmic ascetic might prove susceptible to thoughts of renewal. He draws back his bow, aims at the motionless figure whose meditation has become legend, and releases his most potent shaft directly at the destroyer's heart. The effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. The third eye blazes open in Maheshvara's forehead, not gentle awakening the gods hoped for, but terrible opening of the orb of destruction that sees through all illusion. The blazing sight focuses on Manmatha, with intensity reducing the love god to ash, faster than lightning crosses sky, demonstrating that desire cannot be forced upon one who has transcended all wanting. Parvati watches the fiery immolation with the despair of one whose hopes vanish alongside the god who carried them. Yet in that seeming ruin, as the ashes of desire drift down, and the great Lord's third eye closes again into stone-like meditation, she chooses the path that will shape her destiny and the future of cosmic balance. If gentle service cannot awaken him, if divine intervention only provokes destruction, then she must find another way, a path so intense, so complete in dedication, that even the destroyer's absolute withdrawal cannot remain unmoved by its sincerity. The mountain daughter abandons her father's crystal palace and takes residence on Kailash itself, beginning penance so severe it makes legendary sages' austerities seem comfortable. Standing on one leg for years, stretching into centuries, Uma reduces her body to skin-covering bones, beautiful form withering as she pours life force into single-pointed intention of awakening divine love through devotion's sheer intensity. She eats only fallen leaves, drinks morning dew, sleeps never, consciousness focused with laser precision on the motionless figure whose awakening has become her existence's sole purpose. Seasons cycle around her unmoving form, as snow gives way to brief summers and back to snow. Her hair, once lustrous gold, becomes matted with ice and wind. Her skin, once soft as lotus petals, grows rough with exposure to elements that would kill lesser beings. Yet her eyes burn with intensity, gathering rather than diminishing with each passing year, while growing stronger as body grows weaker. The cosmic ascetic, deep in trance, begins experiencing unprecedented disturbance in absolute stillness, tiny ripples in perfect calm. Something calls from outside his self-absorption's boundaries, some attraction so pure, selfless, completely without demand, that even his resistance to disturbance weakens. When he finally emerges from meditation to investigate this cosmic anomaly, when awareness returns to discover its source, he finds the mountain daughter in her incredible penance's final stages. But instead of immediately revealing himself, instead of acknowledging devotion that accomplished what divine intervention could not, Maheshvara chooses to test her commitment's depth and authenticity. Disguised as a wandering ascetic, he approaches the emaciated figure, whose penance has become legend throughout 3 worlds. Speaking casually, he begins criticizing the very deity she seeks through her austerities. Why torture yourself for such an unworthy object? The disguised destroyer asks with feigned concern. This Shiva is nothing but a mad ascetic dwelling with corpses and demons, knowing nothing of proper behavior. Surely someone of your spiritual attainment could find a more suitable focus. In that moment, her devotion proves what seemed impossible. Love more whole, more unconditional, more relentless in guarding her beloved than the destroyer's own bond to cosmic law. Weak in form but unending in spirit, the Golden One stands firm, her passion blazing brighter than the cosmic eye that consumed desire. Speak no criticism of the great Lord in my presence, she declares, voice carrying authority, making the disguised deity step back in genuine surprise. What you call madness is freedom from limitations, keeping beings bound to suffering. What you call improper behavior is courage to live by truth rather than convention. I would rather die in devotion to such authentic divinity than live comfortably worshipping any lesser ideal. In that moment, hearing his nature defended with such fierce loyalty, witnessing devotion exceeding even his legendary intensity, the cosmic ascetic recognizes not just his lost beloved's reincarnation, but something more precious. Love evolved through loss into perfect understanding. Dedication purified by suffering into complete selflessness. A wedding unfolds that reshapes the universe, reuniting ascetic solitude with engaged love, silent transcendence with embodied devotion, detached awareness with passionate commitment. In their joining, the great Lord realizes love, divine, is not bondage leading to pain, but freedom expressed in relationship, while the daughter of the mountain discovers that true devotion alters not only the devotee, but also the very essence of the beloved. In their mountain dwelling, where the cosmic destroyer has learned to balance meditation with married life's joys, Parvati desires privacy for her bath. The solution emerges from her creative power. Taking turmeric paste mixed with sacred oils, the mountain daughter sculpts with focused intention, her hands shaping the golden substance according to consciousness's deepest template. What emerges is a child perfect in every detail, beautiful beyond mortal conception. The Divine Mother breathes life into her creation, watching as the blessed earth transforms into flesh, as maternal will becomes living consciousness. Guard my door while I bathe, she tells the newly awakened being. Let no one enter, no matter who they claim to be. Your loyalty is to me alone. The elephant-headed one, for so his form will be remembered, takes his post with mountain-like determination, innocent eyes reflecting absolute trust in parental instruction, will shaped by devotion, knowing no compromise. When Maheshvara returns from wanderings, expecting casual entry into his own dwelling, he encounters unprecedented resistance. The cosmic lord finds his path blocked by a child he has never seen. Stand aside, the great father commands, voice carrying weight of absolute authority. I am Shiva, master of this dwelling. No power can bar my way. But Ganesha, shaped by maternal instruction and knowing only the command to guard, stands firm with innocence's immovable certainty. My mother told me to allow no one entry. I know nothing of masters. I know only duty to the one who gave me life. Events rush forward with the fierce momentum of storms. The destroyer, encountering defiance where obedience should reign, reacts instinctively. His strike falls before awareness awakens, before compassion can soften wrath, before the cosmic father perceives his victim is his son. The beloved son's head rolls in courtyard dust, innocent eyes still reflecting trust as life departs from the golden form. The silence contains irreversible action's weight. Love meeting love in mutual destruction. When Uma emerges to find her son's headless form, when she realizes her husband's inability to recognize what he had never seen led to cosmic tragedy, her grief transforms into fury, making elements recoil. This is creation confronting senseless destruction. Love meeting divine power's limits. "Restore him," she demands, voice carrying ultimatum, admitting no negotiation. Find a way to undo this blindness, or face the mountain daughter's absolute refusal to forgive. The great lord, confronting his error's magnitude, sends attendants racing across dimensions for solution. The first creature they encounter, whose head faces north, wisdom's direction, is an elephant, noble in bearing, gentle in nature, intelligent beyond ordinary beasts. When the elephant's head is placed upon Vignahata's shoulders, when divine breath again animates the golden form, something unprecedented emerges. The remover of obstacles is born from obstacle itself. The patron of new beginnings emerges from ending. The deity who will become first to be invoked in sacred undertakings rises from cosmic misunderstanding, transformed into wisdom. Still, forces of destiny call for another son, not through the pull of maternal desire, but through the weight of inevitability. For Tarakasura, whose power swells with time, carries a boon decreeing that only the destroyer's offspring may defeat him. The war god's birth transcends ordinary generation. From the cosmic lord's seed, too potent for any single womb, emerges energy so concentrated it must be carried by Agni, then transferred to sacred Ganga, whose purifying waters alone can channel such force without being consumed. Even the holy river cannot contain this blazing essence indefinitely. She deposits it in a reed grove where the 6 mothers, the Kritikas, stellar beings whose maternal instinct transcends limitation, find the glowing infant whose 6 heads and 12 arms speak of power, designed for heavenly conflict. The stellar nurses raise Skanda with combined wisdom of 6 mothers, each contributing understanding of warfare, strategy, compassion, and duty. Under their care, the 6-headed one develops not just martial skills necessary to defeat cosmic evil, but balanced wisdom needed to wield destructive power responsibly. When the brothers cross paths, the elephant-headed child of household devotion and the war-born son of necessity, their bond weaves rivalry with recognition. Each carries a reflection of their father, one as the gentle remover of obstacles guiding devotees, the other as the fierce warrior who defends heavenly order from the rise of evil. Their competition becomes the template for sibling relationships throughout creation, but also something deeper, eternal interplay between wisdom and strength, between patient service and decisive action, between nurturing power and protective force. From his perspective as father to both, Maheshvara learns that divine parenthood requires balancing authority with affection, discipline with tenderness, cosmic responsibility with personal love. In teaching his sons, he discovers even the destroyer must sometimes yield. Even supreme power must acknowledge the autonomy of those it helped create. Ganesha takes his place as the deity invoked at every beginning, his elephant wisdom teaching that true strength often wears gentleness's appearance, that greatest power lies in clearing impediments rather than forcing through them. Kartikeya becomes the eternal protector, his 6 faces seeing danger from every direction, martial skill ensuring righteousness has strength to defend against evil's assaults. Together they embody the full span of their father's nature, creator and destroyer, sage and warrior, gentle guide and relentless protector, the household god who clears daily paths, and the cosmic champion who slays demons threatening the worlds. Through their tales, the cosmic family offers a model for all families, their divine bonds reflecting mortal love's joys and struggles, reminding that even gods must master the balance of power and compassion that sustains family life. From the shadows dwelling in every heart arise beings that test whether sacred order can endure pure selfishness. They are no ordinary foes, but condensed forms of ego, dangerous enough to unravel reality's foundations. Against them, the destroyer must show another face, not the gentle guide or devoted father, but the divine warrior who proves that evil, however mighty, carries within it the seed of its own ruin. A strange adversary comes forth from Maheshvara himself. During tender play with Parvati, as her fingers veil his eyes, sweat collects upon the great Lord's hands, and from that union of shadow and divine essence arises Andaka, sightless from the beginning, yet gifted with immense strength. He thrives while carrying the tragic weakness of ignorance toward his own origin. The blind demon's armies conquer realm after realm, until his obsessive desire fixes upon Parvati herself, not realizing the goddess he covets is the very mother whose essence gave birth to his father. When the lustful one storms Kailash, demanding surrender of the divine consort, the confrontation transcends ordinary battle. The destroyer's trident pierces the Shadowborn's chest with precision, speaking not of anger, but inevitable consequence. Yet impalement does not kill. Instead, it becomes teaching, stretching across eons. Suspended on the weapon, the blind demon must confront his desire's futility, the impossibility of possessing what belongs to forces greater than individual will. Ages pass while the lustful one hangs from the celestial weapon, strength ebbing as understanding dawns. When transformation finally comes, it is recognition. He suddenly sees that the goddess he desired is his mother, that the destroyer he challenged is the father whose essence birthed him. Released from the trident, former evil burned away, he becomes a devoted son, proving even deepest shadow can be illuminated. Tripurazura presents different trials. These three brothers construct flying cities so magnificent they shame divine palaces, mobile fortresses sailing through heavens like ships on infinite ocean. Their aerial empire grows in power until they consider themselves superior to any earthly or celestial authority. The three-city demon becomes drunk on cleverness, ability to remain always in motion, beyond reach of those calling him to account. His flying fortresses rain destruction while staying safely beyond retaliation, mobility making them seem invulnerable. But the divine warrior understands that all movement follows predictable patterns, that even sophisticated flight paths can be calculated by sufficiently vast intelligence. The great Lord waits, observing the three cities' orbital dance through ages, mapping trajectories with supreme precision. The moment comes when celestial mechanics brings all fortresses into perfect alignment, paths converging into vulnerability existing less time than lightning's flash. In that instant, Maheshvara draws his bow. Not ordinary weapon, but Mount Meru's spine, strung with serpent Vasuki, loaded with arrow forged from Vishnu's concentrated essence. The single shaft passes through all three cities simultaneously. Destruction so complete nothing remains but hubris meeting divine justice. Yet even in annihilation, the aerial enemy finds not punishment, but liberation from pride that made magnificent creations into oppression's instruments. Jalandhara presents the most complex challenge, for this ocean-born demon possesses genuine invincibility, not through magical weapons, but his wife's perfect chastity. Vrinda's absolute fidelity creates protective shield no power can penetrate. Demonstrating virtue itself can become weapon when wielded by pure intentions. The invincible warrior's strength grows from his wife's moral perfection. her unwavering devotion creating spiritual fortress more impregnable than physical defense. Even the destroyer finds himself unable to defeat enemy, protected by such genuine virtue. The solution must emerge from the preserver, whose understanding of Maya allows approaching the problem unexpectedly. Vishnu assumes the waterborne's form, visiting the chaste one while her true husband battles elsewhere. The deception succeeds through the faithful spouse's own goodness, her hospitality toward what she believes is her returning husband, joy at apparent victory, natural wifely affection. In that moment of innocent welcome, protective power falters enough to make the proud challenger vulnerable. The divine warrior's victory follows immediately, yet carries tragedy, for the ocean-born's strength had been genuine, rooted in authentic virtue. His defeat comes not from evil, but from using goodness as weapon, turning love into pride's instrument. Bhasmasura represents the strangest challenge, an enemy defeating himself through foolishness, whose destruction requires no divine intervention, but patience to let stupidity run its course. The ash demon, granted by the destroyer himself power to burn anything his hand touches, decides to test this gift on its giver. The great lord, faced with the self-destructive approaching with outstretched hand, does not fight or flee, but simply runs, not in fear but wisdom, understanding sometimes the best response to folly is letting it exhaust itself. The chase becomes legend, the divine warrior leading the burning touch on pursuit, ending only when Vishnu, disguised as beautiful woman, tricks the foolish one into placing deadly hand upon his own head. In each battle, a pattern emerges, revealing the destroyer's deepest nature. He seeks not to annihilate enemies, but transform them, not to prove superiority, but demonstrate that concentrated evil ultimately serves universal order's purposes. The Shadowborn becomes devoted sun. The aerial enemy finds liberation from pride. The proud challenger learns limits of using virtue as weapon. The self-destructive removes himself through his own folly. These are not victories in ordinary sense, but teachings written in conflict's language, demonstrations that the divine warrior's true purpose is not destruction, but transformation, not ending opposition, but converting it into understanding. In each battle, the destroyer reveals his ultimate weapon is not violence, but patience, not force, but willingness to allow each being to discover through experience the futility of opposing fundamental laws governing existence itself. Each demon represents aspect of ego requiring destruction, blind desire, aerial pride, corrupted virtue, self-defeating foolishness. Yet what makes these stories profound is not their violence, but their ultimate compassion, the recognition that even evil serves teaching's purpose, that every enemy contains within themselves the seed of their own transformation, waiting only for sufficient pressure to crack open and reveal the devotee hidden beneath the demon's mask. Under the spreading canopy of a banyan tree, whose roots have drunk from the earth since time's beginning, whose branches shelter knowledge older than the oldest scriptures, sits a figure that inverts every expectation the mind forms about wisdom and its transmission. This is not the ancient guru whose white beard speaks of accumulated years, not the weathered sage whose lined face tells stories of hard-won understanding. This is Shiva as the young teacher, his form radiating the eternal freshness of truth that never ages, wisdom that remains forever new, no matter how many eons witness its revelation. The southern-facing one, for so his aspect here is known, sits in perfect lotus position beneath the sacred fig, his back to the north, where tradition locates the source of spiritual power, his face turned toward the south, where death and dissolution hold dominion. In this simple positioning lies a teaching that will echo through millennia. that true wisdom flows not from the accumulation of experiences, but from the willingness to face directly what most seek to avoid, to find in ending not termination, but transformation. His appearance defies the conventional imagery of spiritual authority. No grey hair marks the passage of countless years. No wrinkles speak of wisdom earned through suffering's school. Instead, the wordless guru appears as eternal youth, his features carrying the timeless beauty of one who has discovered that age and youth, experience and innocence, are merely costumes worn by consciousness that knows itself to be beyond all temporal limitations. 4 ancient seekers approach this paradoxical teacher with the halting steps of those who have exhausted every conventional means of attaining understanding. These are not spiritual beginners, but masters in their own right, beings whose lives span cosmic ages, whose knowledge encompasses every system of philosophy, every method of meditation, every technique for expanding awareness that their era has developed. Yet something in their long seeking has brought them to recognize the limitations of all accumulated learning, the insufficiency of every approach that treats wisdom as information to be gathered, rather than truth to be realized. They come to the teaching tree not as students seeking new concepts, but as empty vessels finally ready to be filled with something that transcends conceptual understanding entirely. The elderly disciples arrange themselves before the young sage with the reverence of those who sense they are approaching the culmination of lifetimes of spiritual effort. They prepare their questions, formulate their doubts, organize their intellectual challenges with the precision of master debaters ready to engage in sophisticated philosophical discourse. But when they open their mouths to speak, when they prepare to demonstrate their learning and present their complex inquiries, something unprecedented occurs. The silent teacher raises his hand, not in blessing, not in greeting, but in the mudra of instruction that somehow contains within its simple gesture every answer they might seek, every resolution their questions require, every teaching that words could possibly convey. In that raised hand, the ancient seekers witness something that no scripture has adequately described, no philosophical system has successfully mapped. They see the fundamental nature of reality itself, not as concept to be grasped, but as recognition to be experienced, not as knowledge to be possessed, but as understanding that possesses the knower so completely that knower and known reveal themselves as movements within a single, undifferentiated awareness. The transmission that occurs beneath the sheltering branches happens without words, because words are too slow, too clumsy, too limited to carry the fullness of what the young sage embodies. In the space of a single moment that somehow contains eternities, the 4 sages receive not just answers to their questions, but dissolution of the questioner itself, not just resolution of their doubts, but recognition that the doubter was itself the final obstacle to perfect understanding. This teaching through silence becomes the template for the highest form of spiritual instruction, the recognition that ultimate truth cannot be spoken, but only indicated, cannot be explained but only revealed through the direct transmission of awakened consciousness to receptive awareness. The wordless guru establishes the principle that will guide authentic teaching through all ages, that real wisdom flows not through verbal instruction, but through the presence of one who has realized their own essential nature. Yet this same teacher who instructs through silence also becomes the source of the most elaborate verbal teachings, the origin of texts and traditions that will preserve and transmit spiritual knowledge through countless generations. From his meditation emerge the agamas, the revealed scriptures that will provide the theological foundation for Shiva worship, the detailed instructions for temple construction, ritual performance, and spiritual practice that will guide devotees for millennia. The apparent contradiction dissolves when understanding deepens. The sacred texts that flow from the southern-facing one are not alternatives to silence, but expressions of it, not replacements for direct transmission, but preparations for it. Every verse of the divine teachings serves ultimately to bring students to the point where words become unnecessary, where the elaborate scaffolding of spiritual practice can be discarded in favor of the direct recognition that the scriptures exist to facilitate. In his aspect as the source of all arts and sciences, the wordless guru reveals to Parvati the complete spectrum of human cultural achievement, the 64 sacred skills that encompass everything, from music and poetry to mathematics and medicine, from cooking and textile work to the subtle arts of love and the sophisticated techniques of statecraft. Through the divine consort, this knowledge flows into human civilization, providing the foundation for all cultural development. The teaching of these sacred crafts reveals another dimension of the silent teacher's wisdom. Spiritual realization, he demonstrates, does not require abandonment of worldly skills, but their transformation, not rejection of cultural life, but its elevation to expressions of divine creativity. Every art becomes sacred when performed with awareness. Every skill becomes spiritual practice when engaged with full presence. Among the recipients of the southern-facing one's instruction stands Patanjali, the serpent sage who will codify the science of yoga into systematic form. From the wordless guru's silent presence, the great systematizer receives not just techniques for physical and mental discipline, but understanding of consciousness itself, the recognition that all yogic practices serve ultimately to reveal what is always already present. Similarly, Panini receives from the young teacher the grammatical principles that will organize Sanskrit into its perfect form, discovering that language itself can become vehicle for spiritual transmission when its underlying patterns reflect the fundamental structures of consciousness itself. The divine teachings flow through grammar as readily as through meditation, through precise use of words as directly as through transcendence of all verbal expression. In the Tamil tradition, the silent teacher takes yet another form, appearing as the divine linguist who reveals that spiritual truth can find expression in any language sophisticated enough to contain it. The regional tongues, no less than Sanskrit, can become vehicles for the highest teachings when approached with sufficient understanding and devotion. The story of Markandeya provides perhaps the most dramatic illustration of the teaching tree's power. When death itself comes to claim the devoted youth, when even divine protection seems insufficient against time's ultimate authority, the death-defying sage embraces the lingam with such complete surrender that mortality itself must yield. In that embrace, the eternal devotee discovers what the four ancient seekers learned through silence, that what appears to end is revealed, upon closer inspection, to be what never began. What seems to die is recognized as what was never born. Through all these manifestations and teachings, a single principle emerges, that true instruction happens not through the transfer of information, but through the recognition of what was always already known, not through the acquisition of new knowledge, but through the removal of obstacles to what is eternally present. The silent teacher demonstrates that wisdom is not something to be attained, but something to be uncovered. Not a destination to be reached, but the ground from which all seeking arises, and to which it must ultimately return, deep in the wilds, where the laws of men fade before the ancient order of nature. Arjuna reaches a turning point of fate. Once celebrated as the finest archer of his time, the Pandava prince now stands bereft of all that gave him stature, his kingdom lost to the deceit of dice. his brothers driven into exile, his pride broken by powers no warrior could withstand. From humiliation is born resolve in one marked for destiny. The devoted fighter enters the forest not to retreat, but to forge arms strong enough to face fate. His penance becomes the place where mortal striving touches divine power. The penance continues day by day until the wilderness itself seems to take note. The Pandava archer endures on one leg for months, eating only what the forest yields without force, drinking dew gathered at dawn. His body grows frail, yet his spirit gathers strength, determination glowing like fire at sacrifice. The gods begin showering blessings, celestial weapons, arrows that never miss, divine knowledge transforming mere archery into sacred art. Yet Arjuna's seeking reaches beyond these gifts towards something no deity has granted mortal hands. The Pashupatastra, the ultimate weapon belonging to the Lord of Beasts himself. This supreme astra exists beyond ordinary divine weapons. Where other celestial arrows merely destroy enemies, the weapon of weapons possesses power to unmake creation itself, if wielded without perfect wisdom. It demands not just skill, but transformation of the very soul that would wield it. Such test arrives disguised as coincidence. A wild pig crashes through forest undergrowth with desperate energy. Arjuna's response emerges from pure instinct. His bow appears, arrow nocked and released in movement so fluid it seems natural law expressing itself. The shaft flies true, finding its mark with precision, speaking of skill elevated to art. But simultaneously, from another angle, a second arrow pierces the beast. This crude shaft bears marks of tribal craftsmanship. Feathers from wilderness birds, stone point carved by hands that learned hunting from the forest itself, rather than royal teachers. The tribal warrior who emerges challenges every assumption about skill's sources. This Kirata's bearing speaks of intimate knowledge with forces that terrify civilized warriors. His skin dark as forest loam, hair matted with ash, decorated with bones telling stories of hunts in realms where ordinary men lose their minds. The kill is mine, the hunter declares, voice carrying authority, needing no royal proclamation. My arrow struck first, claimed the life that feeds earth. The seeker's pride flares. My shot was true, my claim established by superior skill. No forest dweller can dispute archery trained in royal courts by legendary masters. What follows transcends ordinary conflict. This becomes testing ground, where different forms of excellence measure themselves, where courtly refinement meets wilderness wisdom in combat, determining worthiness to wield world-ending power. Battle erupts with violence, making surrounding trees lean away. Arjuna's masterwork arrows meet the tribal warrior's crude shafts in midair. Collision of different warfare philosophies made visible. Every technique the devoted warrior has mastered finds itself answered by responses emerging from the forest itself. The forest dweller fights like storm-made flesh, movements following patterns speaking of deeper rhythms than human teachers have codified. His arrows appear from impossible angles, footwork tracing paths leaving no prints, yet always placing him where advantage lies. Hours pass in deadly dance as two masters demonstrate that excellence recognizes excellence regardless of origin. Arjuna's strength begins ebbing, royal training proving inadequate against opponent whose endurance seems drawn from the wild place's inexhaustible energy. When defeat becomes inevitable, when the devoted warrior's arrows fail, while the hunter's shafts draw closer to vital spots, recognition dawns with lightning's suddenness. The crude tribal warrior's eyes hold depths no mortal gaze has ever contained, power no forest dweller could possess. wisdom speaking of consciousness older than witnessing trees. Arjuna's bow falls from nerveless fingers as understanding penetrates pride's final barriers. Before him stands not rival hunter, but the divine hunter himself, the lord of beasts in tribal form, testing whether worthiness extends beyond technical skill into character's deeper realms. The great lord's transformation from Kirata to divine form happens gradually, allowing mortal eyes to adjust to radiance that would blind unprepared vision. What emerges is Maheshvara, as the archer whose arrows never miss, because they target ignorance, preventing truth's recognition. You have fought well, the destroyer acknowledges, voice carrying approval earned through genuine testing. Your skill matches your willingness to engage unknown opponent with full commitment. Such dedication marks you as worthy recipient of what you have sought. The Pashupatastra appears not as mere weapon, but as responsibility that will follow him through remaining battles. With the supreme astra comes knowledge of when its use serves Dharma, and when it threatens the very order it exists to protect. The ultimate weapon reveals itself as ultimate test of wisdom, power that destroys its wielder if employed without perfect understanding. In receiving the divine arrow, Arjuna discovers true strength lies not in possessing irresistible force, but in knowing when such force must remain unused. That greatest victory sometimes requires discipline to lose battles rather than win wars, destroying what they claim to protect. Within the mountain refuge, where long years of meditation have smoothed the stone and the air feels heavy with awareness, Parvati undertakes a discipline so profound it reshapes not only her inner being, but the very symbols through which divine truth becomes visible to mortals. As the goddess of power, the force that turns pure consciousness into living creation, she begins through relentless contemplation to merge her essence with that of her ever-absorbed consort, until the line between self and other, subject and object, dissolves. Day after day, season following season, Shakti pours her entire being into the singular intention of perfect union, not the temporary joining that occurs in moments of physical intimacy, but the permanent dissolution of separateness that reveals the underlying unity from which all apparent duality emerges. Her meditation becomes a reverse creation, an intentional return to the source from which both consciousness and energy originally manifested as apparently separate principles. The transformation begins subtly, almost imperceptibly, like dawn creeping across a landscape so gradually that observers cannot pinpoint the moment when darkness yields to light. The divine feminine's form starts to merge with her beloved's motionless body, not as external joining, but as recognition that the boundary between them was always conceptual rather than actual, always apparent rather than real. What emerges from this ultimate act of devotional absorption is something unprecedented in the annals of religious iconography. Ardhanarishvara, the half-woman lord, whose very form challenges every assumption mortal minds make about identity, gender, completeness, and the relationship between consciousness and its creative power. The right half blazes with the fierce masculinity of pure awareness, ash-smeared, serpent-adorned, bearing the symbols of transcendence and detachment. The left half glows with the tender femininity of creative energy, golden-skinned, flower-bedecked, carrying the implements of nurturing and manifestation. This is not hermaphroditism as biology understands it, not some curious mixing of male and female characteristics, but the visual representation of a truth too profound for ordinary language to convey, that ultimate reality transcends all dualistic categories, while simultaneously containing and expressing every possible polarity. In the unified form, the eternal question of which principle holds primacy, consciousness or energy, Shiva or Shakti, the witness or the witnessed, reveals itself as meaningless, based on a fundamental misunderstanding of their essential identity. The lesson of inseparability finds its most dramatic illustration in the story of Bringi, the devoted sage whose spiritual practices have reduced his body to little more than animated skeleton, whose dedication to the great Lord burns with intensity that makes ascetic fires seem like flickering candles. This stubborn worshipper arrives at the mountain dwelling with the singular intention of performing circumambulation around Shiva alone, his sectarian devotion unable to acknowledge that the divine feminine might deserve equal reverence. But when the skeletal devotee attempts to walk around the destroyer while excluding the goddess from his ritual attention, he discovers something that forces a complete revision of his understanding. There is no space between the divine couple, no gap through which exclusive devotion might squeeze, no angle from which Maheshvara can be approached without simultaneously encountering Shakti. Every attempt to honor one while ignoring the other reveals itself as impossibility, like trying to circumambulate wetness while avoiding water, attempting to worship heat while rejecting fire. Frustration mounts in the three-legged one as each ritual attempt collapses, theological categories crumbling before the reality at hand. In desperation, he becomes a beetle, imagining that tiny form might slip through some hidden gap between the joined deities. Yet even at the smallest scale, the search fails. Energy and awareness stand so perfectly one that separation proves impossible. The complete being's response to this devotional dilemma transcends mere correction of theological error. With compassion that embraces even mistaken understanding, the half-woman Lord creates the teaching that will echo through all subsequent spiritual instruction. Duality serves its purpose in the preliminary stages of seeking, but ultimate realization requires recognition that all apparent opposites are movements within a single, undifferentiated reality. Still, this unified form represents only one facet of a truth so vast, it requires multiple expressions to hint at its fullness. From the same source that manifests as the tender combination of masculine and feminine emerges something that challenges every assumption about divine benevolence, every expectation that spiritual truth will present itself in forms comfortable to human sensibilities. The terrible forms begin to emerge from the great Lord's inexhaustible essence like nightmare shadows cast by blazing light. Bhairava appears first, not the gentle teacher or loving husband, but the frightful one whose very name makes brave souls tremble, whose appearance would drive unprepared minds into madness. His naked body gleams with cosmic fire. His hair streams with the energy of dissolution itself. His ornaments are the severed heads of ego-driven thoughts that have been sacrificed on the altar of absolute truth. This fierce aspect carries in his hands not the instruments of blessing, but the tools of terror, the skull that reminds all beings of their mortality, the drum whose beat marks the rhythm of universal destruction, the noose that binds ignorance until it transforms or dies. Yet even his frightfulness serves compassion, for Bhairava destroys only what prevents souls from recognizing their own divine nature, terrifies only those attachments that keep consciousness bound to limitation. Kalabhairava emerges as time's master and time's destroyer, the cosmic guardian who demonstrates that duration itself, past, present, and future, exists only within awareness that transcends all temporal limitations. This aspect teaches through presence too intense for comfortable contemplation, showing that the one who would know truth must be willing to face the dissolution of everything familiar, everything comfortable, everything that provides false security against the vastness of what actually is. The 8 Bhairavas take their positions as directional guardians, each one protecting a different approach to the central mystery. each one representing the terrible beauty that must be encountered by consciousness, brave enough to investigate its own fundamental nature. These are not demons to be feared, but aspects of the seeker's own divine essence, revealed in forms so powerful they can only be approached by those who have exhausted every gentler possibility. In Kashi, the luminous city where every stone has been worn smooth by millions of pilgrims seeking liberation, the terrible form known as Bhairava takes up residence as cosmic policeman, ensuring that the sacred geography maintains its purity through the simple expedient of making dishonest behavior literally impossible within the city's bounds. Here, the frightful one demonstrates that terror and protection are two faces of the same coin, that what appears threatening to ego-driven consciousness reveals itself as ultimate safety to those who have surrendered their small sense of separate selfhood. Agora emerges as the aspect that embraces what others reject, that finds divine beauty in what conventional spirituality considers polluted or dangerous. This left-handed path shows that ultimate reality excludes nothing, that consciousness vast enough to encompass infinite universes cannot be contaminated by any experience, any substance, any practice that serves the purpose of awakening. The Agora tradition teaches that taboo itself is limitation, that true spiritual maturity requires the courage to investigate what others consider forbidden. Through all these manifestations, from the tender unity of the half-woman Lord to the cosmic terror of the various Bhairavas, from the gentle teacher to the devourer of time itself, a single truth emerges that will transform every subsequent understanding of divine nature. The great Lord contains within his limitless being every possible form, and the formless source from which all forms emerge, every conceivable attribute, and the attributeless awareness that makes all qualities possible. He is simultaneously the most beautiful being imaginable, and so terrible that direct sight of his cosmic form would annihilate unprepared consciousness. He is the most gentle teacher and the most ruthless destroyer, the most loving father and the most demanding guru, the most accessible deity and the most transcendent reality. In his endless manifestations, seekers discover that approaching the heavenly requires not the comfort of familiar categories, but the courage to embrace paradox so complete it shatters every limitation the mind attempts to impose upon infinite mystery. From the single form comes the message that separation is illusion. From the fierce form, the recognition that truth destroys only chains to release. Seen together, they disclose that what mortals call divine is not remote, but the essence of their innermost self, eternal, immediate, beyond all forms yet ever embodied in the play of consciousness. Dust rises from the feet of 10,000 pilgrims, walking roads worn smooth by millions who came before them, their destinations scattered across a subcontinent, transformed into living temple by the great Lord's presence. Each step carries them toward one of 12 sites, where divine light pierced the veil between formless and form, where the destroyer chose to anchor his infinite essence in finite stone. The first pilgrimage leads to Somnath, where the moon god Chandra found release from a curse consuming his luminous form. Daksha's 27 daughters, married to the celestial being who marks time's passage, had grown jealous of his exclusive devotion to Rohini. Their father's curse condemned the moon to waste away, growing thinner each month until darkness would claim the night forever. At Somnath's shore, where waves have chanted Shiva's name since the first tide, Chandra discovered that sincere devotion could transform divine judgment into blessing. The great Lord's compassion restored the lunar deity's waxing power, though waning remained as reminder that all forms must yield to time's passage. The temple arising here became testament that no curse can overcome authentic surrender. Mallikarjuna witnessed reconciliation between Divine Father and his beloved sons when rivalry threatened cosmic family harmony. Ganesha and Kartikeya competed for parental favor until Parvati and Maheshvara devised a test. Whichever son circumambulated the three worlds fastest would win. While the war god mounted his peacock and soared through distant realms, the elephant-headed one simply walked around his parents, declaring them his entire universe. This wisdom so moved the great lord that he manifested at Mallikarjuna as the deity who understands that true devotion finds the infinite within the immediate. Here, seekers learn that the longest journeys sometimes end where they began, that the greatest adventures require no movement beyond recognizing what was always present. Mahakaleshwar emerged when a demon's tyranny made Earth itself cry for protection, when conventional weapons proved useless, when even gods found themselves powerless. The destroyer burst from Earth as the protector whose terrible beauty frightens only those who mistake temporary forms for permanent reality. This manifestation teaches that divine intervention comes through awakening power that was always present. In sacred Kashi, where every breath carries jasmine and funeral pyre fragrance, stands Vishwanath, the Lord of the universe whose temple serves as the axis around which all spiritual seeking revolves. Here, pilgrims discover that the great Lord whispers the Taraka mantra into ears of those dying within the city's bounds, ensuring their final moment becomes their first glimpse of freedom beyond all coming and going. The golden temple's spires catch dawn's first light like prayers made visible, their radiance reminding all that even humble devotion becomes luminous when offered with complete sincerity. In Kashi's narrow lanes, where saints and sinners walk the same paths, the destroyer reveals himself as the recycler whose cremation grounds are also nurseries where new consciousness prepares for birth. Chidambaram stands apart because here the great Lord appears not as stone or metal, but as empty space itself, the formless awareness within which the dance unfolds. The Golden Hall houses not an image, but void, not representation, but the very principle all representations attempt to capture. This emptiness speaks more eloquently than any statue, teaches more directly than scripture. The space of consciousness demonstrates that ultimate temple exists wherever awareness recognizes its nature, that most sacred geography lies not in distant pilgrimage sites, but in immediate presence, making all seeking possible. Yet paradoxically, this understanding often dawns in those who have traveled farthest, who exhausted themselves in external searching before discovering the treasure they carried all along. Mount Kailash rises beyond other sacred mountains as the throne where the destroyer sits in eternal meditation, his awareness encompassing past, present, and future in the single moment that never ends. Unlike other sites, this peak cannot be conquered through ordinary pilgrimage or simple devotion. The sacred mountain demands transformation of the very consciousness approaching it, accepting only those who have begun recognizing their deathless nature. Here, where snow never melts completely and air seems crystallized from pure attention, the great Lord demonstrates that highest teaching happens in silence, that deepest communion occurs when seeker and sought dissolve into recognition that they were never separate. The throne teaches not through words, but through presence so concentrated it catalyzes the recognition awaiting all sincere seekers. The network of sacred sites creates a mandala of awakening across the subcontinent, each location serving as particular doorway to the same infinite mystery. Some emphasize compassion, others wisdom. Some teach through beauty, others through terror. Some welcome all comers. Others accept only those prepared by lifetimes of practice. Together, they demonstrate that the Great Lord's accessibility transcends all limitations. In forgotten villages where ancient stones bear unreadable inscriptions, in forest groves where tribal peoples maintain rituals older than civilization, in mountain caves where solitary sages discover truths requiring no verification beyond transformation, the Destroyer continues revealing himself to those whose devotion burns brightly enough to melt barriers between human longing and divine response. Dawn breaks over Somnath's shore, where temple bells begin their first call to prayer and waves continue their eternal hymn. Love recognizes no boundaries that human society erects, acknowledges no hierarchies that mortal minds construct, respects no barriers that separate hearts from the divine source they seek with desperate longing. Through the stories of those who found Maheshvara, not in temple complexes built by royal patronage, but in the depths of their own surrender, a radical truth emerges. Devotion burns away every artificial distinction, every social category, every religious regulation that claims to mediate between soul and its beloved. The 63 Nayanas of Tamil tradition represent every possible human condition transformed by love's alchemy. Among them walk kings whose crowns become meaningless before the Destroyer's ash-smeared feet, merchants whose accumulated wealth dissolves into offerings of the heart, farmers whose simple faith moves mountains of theological complexity, and outcasts whose supposed impurity reveals itself as purity that shames the ceremonially clean. Each saint's story becomes a teaching that conventional spirituality cannot accommodate, a demonstration that divine love operates by principles that mock every human attempt to systematize the sacred. Their lives prove that neither birth nor learning, neither social position nor ritual knowledge, determines who may approach the Great Lord with confidence of acceptance. Kanapa emerges from forest depths where tribal law governs and Sanskrit scriptures hold no sway. His devotion so direct, it scandalizes those who mistake elaborate ceremony for genuine worship. The hunter devotee discovers a lingam in jungle clearings and begins offering what his simple life can provide: water carried in his own mouth because he owns no proper vessel, meat from his hunt because he knows no distinction between pure and impure food, flowers picked with the same hands that draw his bow. Temple priests, discovering these offerings, recoil in horror at what they consider desecration. How dare this tribal saint pollute sacred space with flesh, contaminate divine presence with saliva, approach the Destroyer without proper purification? Their complaints reach the Great Lord himself, who responds not with punishment, but with a test that will silence critics forever. The lingam begins to bleed from one eye, as if wounded by some invisible weapon. The eye-giver, seeing his beloved's apparent pain, offers the only solution his simple heart can conceive. He will give his own eye to replace the damaged one. Without hesitation, without consultation with any religious authority, the forest worshipper takes his hunting knife and begins to cut away his own organ of sight. As his blade approaches the second bleeding eye, as the tribal saint prepares to blind himself completely for love's sake, the Great Lord's hand emerges from the stone to stop the sacrifice. Maheshvara's voice rings through the forest, clearing, with approval that reduces all theological criticism to embarrassed silence. No devotee in any world has loved me with such complete abandonment of self-interest. Ravana presents an even more challenging case. The demon king, whose 10 heads hold knowledge that spans universes, whose power makes gods tremble, whose pride drives him toward destruction, yet whose devotion to the Destroyer burns with scholarly intensity that few saints achieve. The Lanka ruler composes hymns to Maheshvara that capture in Sanskrit verse the terrifying beauty of divine dance. the cosmic principles that govern creation and dissolution, the metaphysical truths that library-bound scholars struggle lifetimes to comprehend. The 10-headed one's relationship with his chosen deity transcends simple categories of good and evil, devotee and demon, saint and sinner. In Ravana's passionate verses, the great Lord finds worship sophisticated enough to match his own infinite complexity, understanding profound enough to encompass both his benevolent and terrible aspects. The Demon King's eventual downfall comes not from insufficient devotion, but from the pride that prevents him from applying divine wisdom to his own behavior. From Tamil villages emerges Sambandar, the child saint whose youth makes his spiritual attainments seem impossible to minds that equate wisdom with accumulated experience. The miracle worker's songs flow with spontaneous poetry that contains theological insights no seminary could teach. His presence channels divine power that makes the elements themselves respond to innocent faith. When challenged by competing religious traditions, when asked to prove that his chosen deity possesses power equal to theirs, the divine boy responds not with arguments, but with miracles that silence all debate. His hymns kindle fire on water, restore life to the dead, move hearts so hardened by sectarian prejudice that they crack open to reveal the love always hidden beneath intellectual positions. The young poet's triumph over religious opposition demonstrates that authentic spirituality needs no defense beyond its own transformative power, that truth proves itself through results rather than rhetoric, that divine love, working through surrendered hearts, accomplishes what no amount of theological reasoning can achieve. Basavana revolutionizes devotional practice itself, challenging every assumption about how divine relationship should be structured and maintained. The revolutionary saint establishes communities where caste distinctions dissolve, where Brahmin and outcast share food without concern for ritual purity, where social transformation follows naturally from spiritual recognition that all beings carry the same divine essence beneath their different external circumstances. The poet devotees, Vaishnavas, flow with insights that make established religious authorities deeply uncomfortable. Why should accident of birth determine spiritual capacity? What logic supports the claim that divine grace flows through hereditary privilege rather than sincere seeking? How can truth itself be limited by social categories that divide rather than unite? Through these equality teachings, the social reformer demonstrates that genuine devotion inevitably leads to social justice, that authentic spirituality cannot coexist with systems that deny some people access to the sacred based on circumstances beyond their control. His communities become laboratories where divine love experiments with new forms of human organization. In each devoted life, the same pattern emerges. Conventional religion fails where simple love succeeds. Elaborate ritual proves inadequate where direct surrender accomplishes everything. Social position becomes irrelevant when hearts open completely to the source of all distinction and all unity. The great Lord reveals through his acceptance of such diverse devotees that divine love operates by principles that transcend every human attempt to limit its scope. These saints teach that the destroyer's feet remain equally accessible to forest hunter and scholarly king, to innocent child and revolutionary reformer, to anyone whose devotion burns intensely enough to melt the barriers that separate seeker from sought. Their stories become permanent challenges to every religious system that claims exclusive access to the divine, eternal demonstrations that love alone determines spiritual success. The path they pioneered continues to welcome all who approach with sincere hearts, regardless of birth, learning, social position, or past actions. A democracy of divine love that recognizes no citizenship requirements beyond genuine longing for the truth that destroys all separation. From the ancient cities of the Indus Valley comes the image of a horned figure seated in deep meditation, encircled by wild creatures unafraid of his stillness. Tigers and elephants, rhinoceros and buffalo gather with the ease of children surrounding a beloved teacher. Even in humanity's first great cities, the Lord of Beasts is shown as sovereign of all that breathes. This primeval god carried no name that modern tongues can pronounce, spoke through no scriptures that scholars can decipher, received worship in no temples whose architecture reveals their purpose. Yet something in that ancient carved figure speaks across millennia with startling clarity. Divinity understood not as separation from nature, but as the consciousness within which all natural forces find their harmony, the awareness that makes both wildness and domestication possible. The animal master's relationship with his creatures transcends simple dominion. Every beast that moves through forest and field participates in the eternal dance, every predator and prey fulfilling roles in the divine choreography that sustains life's endless recycling. The lion's hunt becomes sacred ritual, the deer's flight transforms into prayer in motion, the elephant's trumpet sounds the primordial that resonates through dimensions mortals cannot perceive. From among all these devoted creatures, one emerges whose love surpasses even the intensity shown by human saints. Nandi begins his existence not as bull, but as Dharmadev, a sage whose spiritual practices have earned him recognition throughout the three worlds. Yet pride in his achievements blinds the devoted devotee to a crucial understanding that even the highest human attainment represents merely the beginning of true spiritual development. When the great Lord arrives to test this celebrated holy man, appearing in the humble guise of a simple brahmachari seeking alms, Dharmadev's response reveals the limitations that advanced practice can sometimes create rather than dissolve. The sage offers charity with condescending generosity, blessing the supposed young student with patronizing kindness that completely misses the divine presence standing before him. Maheshvara's gentle correction comes in the form of transformation that matches the devotee's actual spiritual condition rather than his imagined attainment. The sacred bull that Dharmadev becomes possesses virtues that his human form lacked: perfect humility, complete surrender, unwavering loyalty that needs no recognition to sustain itself. As the perfect devotee, the bull-formed sage discovers that true spiritual achievement lies not in accumulating powers or gaining reputation, but in becoming so transparent to divine will that no trace of separate selfhood remains to obstruct the flow of grace. The relationship between Lord and Mount transcends all conventional categories. Nandi serves not as mere vehicle, but as the embodiment of Dharma itself. The living principle that ensures divine will manifests in perfect accordance with justice and compassion. Every journey they take together becomes teaching about the harmony possible between power and righteousness, between transcendent awareness and engaged action. Gajasura presents a different aspect of the Beast Lord's dominion, demonstrating how even the most cosmic powers can be contained within natural forms when circumstances require such concealment. The elephant demon's pride grows so vast that he swallows Shiva himself, imagining that consuming divinity will somehow make him divine. The cosmic container discovers instead that he has made himself into a temple, his own belly becoming the sacred space where the great Lord continues his eternal dance. From within the demon's body, Maheshvara performs the very movements that sustain universal order, proving that no confinement, however clever, can interrupt the dance that keeps galaxies spinning and atoms vibrating. The belly dweller eventually realizes that his attempt to imprison the divine has instead transformed him into the most intimate devotee possible. one whose very existence serves as sanctuary for the presence he tried to capture. The elephant demon's liberation comes not through escape, but through recognition. When Gajasura finally understands that he carries the universe's sustainer within himself, his pride transforms into the deepest humility. His aggression melts into perfect service. The great lord emerges from the transformed Asura's body through the navel, establishing the teaching that true freedom comes not from avoiding divine presence, but from allowing it complete access to every corner of one's being. Yet among all the Lord of Beasts manifestations, none strikes more terror into hearts that cling to temporal existence than Kalabhairava, Time's destroyer, the skull-bearer whose very appearance reminds all beings that duration itself must eventually yield to the deathless awareness within which all moments arise and dissolve. This terrible form carries the severed head of Brahma, not as trophy of victory, but as teaching implement that demonstrates how even divine beings must face consequences when pride overrides truth. The skull-bearer's wandering never ends, because the lesson he embodies requires constant reinforcement. In a universe where every creature instinctively fears its own ending, where death remains the final taboo that consciousness struggles to accept, the Time Destroyer serves as persistent reminder that what appears to end was never actually born, that what seems to die reveals itself as what cannot be killed. Ashwathama encounters this terrible form in his own endless wandering, the cursed warrior whose immortality has become burden rather than blessing, the gem-bearer condemned to roam the earth until time's end as punishment for his violation of warrior dharma, finds relief only in temples dedicated to the skull-bearer, only in the presence of the one being who understands that some forms of existence become more painful than death itself. Through these encounters with the Wandering One, the immortal sufferer learns that true atonement requires not the accumulation of suffering, but the willingness to surrender even the identity built around one's crimes. In Kalabhairava's terrible compassion, even the most irredeemable find doorways to redemption that they never imagined possible. The Lord of Beasts reveals through all these relationships that consciousness and creature, divine and animal, eternal and temporal, represent not separate categories, but different movements within the single dance that creates, sustains, and dissolves all forms while remaining itself forever untouched by any change. Every heartbeat sounds the rhythm of this eternal choreography. Every breath participates in the cosmic circulation that connects all life to its deathless source. Morning light catches dewdrops on spider webs in forest clearings where no human foot has ever fallen. And there too, the ancient presence moves through creatures that know his touch, without needing to name the awareness that makes their wildness sacred.